switch. Okay. And then
Okay.
it doesn't take up as much of your desktop. You have more room to see.
Okay.
Okay. So let me get a little bit of background here. When are you taking the test? Are you signed up for it yet?
I don't think so because like when I signed up for some SAT practice on Khan Academy, it asked me when I was taking the test, and Mom, have we signed up for the SAT yet?
No.
No.
I think you have to go to collegeboard.org because
Yeah.
it'll give you a list of the dates and let you register online.
Okay.
All right. When do you think you'll be taking it? Do you know? I mean, is it going to be 3 months from now or 3 weeks from now?
Probably like May or June.
Okay. So we got some time to work on it.
Yeah.
And you've taken a practice SAT?
Yeah, I took one freshman year and sophomore year.
Okay. Do you know what your score was?
No. I don't. I know it wasn't bad.
Okay. Are you looking for help mainly in math or on the verbals also?
Mostly math.
Okay. I am primarily a math tutor. Up until 2 years ago, I would have told you I was strictly a math tutor for the SAT and other math subjects. But since I've been doing these seminars for Sycamore Learning Company, I've actually learned quite a few tips on the reading and grammar parts also. So I'd be happy to share some of those tips with you as we get closer to the test. For now, I would kind of suggest we stick with math. I have to get on another computer to do the other stuff anyway. But what I have here is practice tests done by the college boards, the people who make the regular test. So I feel like this is the best practice test you can do. I mean, you can go to the library or Barnes and Noble and you can find books by Barron's and Princeton Review and Kaplan and all of them. And they're all going to be a little different as to the type of questions they ask. But in terms of being most accurate of representing the questions you're going to find on the SAT, I would go with this one, College Board. Okay. So what I usually do, let me ask you one other question. What kind of math are you you're a junior?
Yeah.
And what kind of math are you taking this year?
Algebra 2 trig.
Okay. Have you gotten into the trig part yet?
No.
But you will before May.
Yeah. That's kind of what I'm working on right now.
Yeah, that would be helpful. There's only maybe 3 or 4 questions on trig on the math section, and they tend to be fairly simple. In other words, if you know SOHCAHTOA, you probably get half of them right. So if you look at the math, the one thing about the math is it goes easy, medium, hard as you go through it. It's really the only part of the SAT that does that. The verbal part tends to mix it up. So you don't really know whether a hard one's coming up or not. But in the math, every time you start a fresh math section, it starts over easy, medium, hard. Okay? And that's worth knowing because in terms of pacing, you're going to be looking at, I think there's 80 questions. I think there's like 25 without a calculator and 55 with a calculator. You end up getting maybe 1.25 minutes per question. So pacing's pretty important. You want to know where you're at on the test. Okay. And you definitely, timing is going to be a problem. If you run out of time, then you are going to want the majority of your effort applied to the easy and medium problems, not so much the hard. If you have to guess on the hard problems, that's fine. But anyway, all the math tests start out with this page of geometry, shapes, and formulas. Okay? So you always have access to this. You don't need to necessarily memorize these. I would, if I were you, make sure you understand each one. In other words, make sure you understand what each variable is there. You got your two special right triangles, which are very important on the test. And then you got your solid geometry down below. And then you got a few notes. There's a few sentences down there that refer to circles and radians and stuff like that. Okay. What I typically do with all my students is just start going through practice tests. If I come across a problem that it's clear you are missing, like you don't know how to factor a quadratic or something, then I'll stop and we'll maybe review factoring quadratics. But if you know how to do a problem, I'll just go on to the next one until we find one you don't know how to do.
Okay.
Okay? And personally, I think that's the best way to tutor the test, rather than for me to try to explain, various math principles to you. Let's just go through the test and figure out where you're weak and where you're strong, and we'll focus on the weak part.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and have you do. I do record all of these sessions, so you would have a chance to review it, and I send you a link after I've processed the file so that you can review it, and it's in the form of like a YouTube file where you can fast forward, pause it, reverse, whatever you need to do.
Awesome.
Okay. So, and I have a drawing tablet hooked up on my end here, so I can write on this page. So let's solve number 1. What would you do there?
Okay. If x minus 1 over 3 equals k and k equals 3. Okay, so you would just do x minus 1 over 3 equals 3.
Okay.
Next, I'm writing this down too. Or I would do 3 over 1 and then cross multiply.
It's actually, that's an unnecessary step.
Oh, okay.
Okay, in other words, you can accomplish the same thing by just getting rid of that 3 in the denominator and multiplying both sides by 3. So this is really what I'm doing. I'm multiplying that side by 3 and I'm multiplying that side by 3. Those 3's cancel. You got x minus 1 equals 9. And then the final step.
And then you add 1.
Okay. So x equal 10. Okay. And on these initial problems of each section, assume they're going to be easy. So don't overthink them. We expect that to be easy. It was. Let's look at the next one, number 2.
Okay.
Have you had imaginary numbers, complex numbers yet?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
For that one, I would just combine them. So like first the whole numbers, like 7 plus negative 8.
In other words, this is the real number, that's the imaginary number, and that's just the coefficient of the imaginary number. Okay?
Okay.
So you're right. The way you handle these problems is you combine the reals and you combine the imaginaries. What do you get?
So it'd be 7 minus 8, so negative 1, and then 3i plus 9i, which is positive 12i.
Okay. Again, fairly straightforward. And notice that you really didn't need to know what I was. They give you this but not necessary. In fact, for a lot of people, that would just confuse them.
Yeah.
The way you handle all of these complex numbers is you do the reals and then you do the imaginaries. Whether I'm subtracting or adding, if I am multiplying, I'm going to FOIL them. You familiar with the word FOIL?
Yeah.
Okay. Not every school uses it anymore. I actually prefer ET, which means every term times every term. But because that's a little bit more robust, it works for trinomials, whereas FOIL only works for two binomials. But if you're multiplying complex numbers, that's what you have, is two binomials. So you just FOIL it. And when you get an I squared, if I is square root of -1, I squared is always -1. So if after you've processed it, you have an I squared, convert it to -1.
Okay.
All right, number 3, a word problem.
On Saturday afternoon, Armand sent M text messages each hour.
I'm going to suggest you read it to yourself, not out loud, only because when you're taking this test, you're not going to be reading it out loud. You're going to have 50 other kids in the room taking it with you. They're not going to go for that. So just read it to yourself and then see what you think the answer is.
Okay, I would say C.
Okay. This one's fairly straightforward. In other words, this one doesn't give people very many problems, as you would expect. It's problem number 3. So we would still expect to be looking at easy problems. However, I'm going to use this to demonstrate a technique that will work on a lot harder problems. Okay? Is all we had going on in this word problem was multiplication and addition, right? If they were to throw in another variable or say turn it into a percent or something where we had to divide by something, now when you got multiplication, addition, and division going on, the problem takes on a whole new scope of difficulty. And so what I would do, I wouldn't do it on an easy problem like this, but I'm going to show you the technique nonetheless. It's called picking numbers. It's where you pick an M and a P, okay? Notice the reason I can do that is there's an M and a P in the question, and every answer has M or P in it. Whenever you see that, that is a great signal that there's an easy way to do it if you can't figure out how to do it. Okay? Here's how it works. Pick a small number for these variables and avoid 0 or 1. In other words, start with 2 if you want. So what do you pick for M?
4.
Okay, how about P? Use different number.
6.
Okay, I would have picked smaller numbers. I would have picked 2 and 3. Only reason I would have picked smaller numbers is because it makes these calculations easier to do. Here, I'll show you. I'm going to correct you just in this instance. Okay, so I would have picked 2 and 3. Now, if I go back and read the problem, if Armand sent 2 text messages each hour for 5 hours, how many did he send? That's pretty easy to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
That's 10, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And Tyrone sent 3 text messages every 4 hours. How many did he send?
12.
So they sent a total of 22 using these 2 numbers. Now, so all we have to do is look at all 4 answers, and whichever one comes to 22, that's going to be it. Well, A, 2 times 3 is 6. That's 54. That's not it. That's
Mm-hmm.
even bigger. That's not it. Well, what does this give us? 10 plus 12, 22. In other words, without even knowing how to set it up, I can figure out what the answer is. Because when you pick numbers, this becomes very intuitive. You immediately know how many messages Armand sent if he sent 2 every 5 hours. Now, I could have used your 4 and 6. It just would have made the numbers bigger. In other words, then Armand would have sent 20 and Tyrone would have sent 24. Now I get 44 total sent, and then the calculations get harder because the numbers are bigger. So when you're picking numbers, pick small numbers, small whole numbers, and stay away from 0 and 1. The reason you stay away from 0 and 1 is because they have unique mathematical properties. You cannot divide by 0, and the inverse or the reciprocal of 1 is 1. And there's no other numbers that have those properties, so that's why you stay away from 0 and 1.
Okay.
Okay, so let's scroll down. Now, I'm not saying I would have used that technique on number 3. I would not have, because I can see it in my head that the answer is 5m plus 4p. But you throw in another variable there, and all of a sudden you can't believe how much harder it makes seeing it in your head. So this picking numbers is a really cool technique to use when you can't see it in your head.
Okay.
Okay. Let's look at number 4. Go ahead and read that to yourself. So we can see the problems are getting a little bit harder.
Yeah, it's like word problems are kind of hard for me. So
I'm sorry, what?
word problems are kind of hard for me. Like it's hard for me to
They're
put it all
hard.
together.
They're hard for everybody. Trust me. There is no type problem that is more hated than word problems.
Yeah.
I do have a secret remedy for word problems when we get to one that lends itself to it. This one doesn't really, but usually the secret to word problems is the very first step you have to do is define your variable. If you define your variable or variables, you'd be amazed at how much easier the problem becomes. And that's what you have to do. But this is a little bit different kind of a word problem.
Okay.
What if
I wrote it
D were 0? That would mean she was just starting the week and has not worked any days, right?
Right.
What is P equal to when D is 0?
108.
So that must be how many phones she starts each week with to fix. Okay? And
Okay.
she's going to fix 23 per day. Because after she's worked one day, she now only has 108 minus 23.
Right.
Okay. Scroll down. Now, don't be necessarily intimidated by hard-looking problems. Number 7. We're not going to get to 7 today, just because we don't have that much time, I don't think. But number 7 looks terrifically difficult, does it not?
Yeah, that looks.
It's actually one of the easier problems. Well, let's talk about it, as long as we're talking about it. Let's say I gave you the following problem. M equals A times B divided by C times P. Can you solve that for P?
Would you multiply?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Multiply both sides by because you have to.
The denominator. You want to get rid of what you're looking to do here is you're looking to get rid of all those three things. And then we'll have P all by itself. Okay?
Right.
So the way I'm going to get rid of all those three things is I'm going to multiply both sides by C. That gets rid of the C. And then I'm going to divide both sides by AB.
Okay.
And that's how I'm going to solve for P. Okay? Now, in problem number 7, they give you this whole paragraph that is completely unnecessary. You could cross that out. That is only served to confuse.
Yeah.
What we're really looking at, this is A, this is B, and that is C. Actually, C is the whole denominator. Okay?
Okay.
So, the answer is going to be M times the denominator divided by the top left numerator and the right numerator. In other words, here's my A, my B, and my C. There's M, and there's P. So,
oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, in other words, it doesn't really matter how complicated this A, B, and C are. They're just expressions. The secret is to, first of all, not get intimidated, not really have to pay any attention at all to what they're defining these letters as. We don't need to know that the loan is in P dollars, that R is in percent, that N is in months. A person could spend 20 minutes. If they didn't know how to do this problem, they could waste 20 minutes trying to work it all out.
Yeah.
And the secret to the problem is recognizing that it's just a problem like that. It's just a simple equation. It's just that A is complicated, B is complicated, and C is complicated. But notice that in all your answers, they're all complicated. They don't simplify anything. You don't need to simplify anything.
Yeah, okay.
Okay? So it's just a question of rearranging the variables, and you do need to know how to solve an equation like that, where you're solving for something other than M. In other words, they give you M in terms of A, B, C, and P. So if you're trying to solve for P, then you got to get rid of the A, B, and C. If you're trying to solve for B, you got to get rid of the A, the C, and the P. Okay? So it really depends on what you're trying to solve for in a problem like that.
Okay.
Okay? All right. That's probably a good place to stop. That probably gives you a fair idea of how this will work if we keep working together. But I will just keep going through problems. And I like to think that 12 sessions is kind of needed for most people to really get good at this. I don't put together any packages of, 12-hour sessions or anything, but I would think you would want to get in about 12 sessions before you take the test, for real.
Okay.
The test is extremely important. It's going to count about a third. It's going to count almost equally as your grade point average. What kind of GPA do you carry?
My average is probably like a 3.8.
Okay, that's pretty good. So you got a good GPA. If you can get a good SAT score, you're going to get into some good colleges. Okay? Even if you can just get an average SAT score, you'll get into some colleges, especially if you have some extracurricular activities. They also count heavily. It might even be a third grade point, third SAT score, third your extracurricular activities. Okay. So that's what college administrators are looking for. And I will make a note as to how far we got through this. And I've got like 5 of these on my computer, 5 of these full practice tests. So we've got plenty of source material to work through. And then maybe after a few sessions of math, we might want to consider having me give you some tips that I give out at these seminars on how to do some of the reading and the punctuation and stuff like that.
Okay.
Okay. Did you score better on the verbal or the math when you took a practice test? Percentage-wise, which one put you in a higher percentile?
I believe math, but as soon as I get off this call, I'm gonna find out what I got on the PSAT.
Okay.
Because I need to know that.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have as a base score. At least you'll be able to tell whether you're making progress or not as we go through tutoring sessions. Okay, and I'll leave it up to you as to whether you want to do half-hour sessions or hour sessions. It just kind of all depends on how long you go before getting burnt out. I would suggest that as you get closer and closer to the test, you start experimenting with some longer tutoring sessions just to kind of build your endurance. In other words, you don't run a marathon by practicing 100-yard dashes. And the test is a 3-hour test. So at some point, you're going to want to get your endurance so your brain can go for 3 hours and still be focused at the end of the 3 hours.
Right.
Okay. Abigail, it's been nice talking to you, and hopefully we'll work together. You can close out GoToMeeting by, well, first of all, clicking on those 2 arrows. That opens the panel up. And then if you click on the X, that'll click you out of the software. Now, if you look on the desktop, just before we go here, look on your desktop and see if you see an orange flower like I'm pointing at over here.
Let's see. No, I don't.
See where I'm pointing? Where it says GoToMeeting and it's an orange icon?
Yeah, I don't see it on
You don't
here.
see that? Okay. Well, the worst case scenario is you just have to go back to join GoToMeeting and put in the meeting ID number. But
Yeah, and I mean, I'll figure it out.
When it installs it on your desktop, it should leave an icon. Or if you could do a search for GoToMeeting, and it'll show you where that is. But so that's the way it works.
Okay.
Okay? All right. You have a good rest of your day. I'll talk to you next time, Abigail.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.